Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and I just got back from the new film, To the Wonder. This is the latest film from Terrence Malick. It's his first, I guess you could say, modern film. It's his first film that isn't a period piece, and it's a very different film from him for other reasons. It's very abstract. There's no real narrative story to it. It has less of a narrative story than I think Tree of Life does, and even the cinematographer, Emmanuel Lubezki, said it was less tied to theatrical conventions and more tied to cinematic conventions. And I think that's very true because it's so epically shot. He did an amazing job as usual. Emmanuel Lubezki is an amazing cinematographer. For the same reasons you might like it, you might hate it. A couple who are Neil and Marina. Neil's played by Ben Affleck, and Marina is played by Olga Kurylenko. So they fall in love in Paris, and she has a daughter from a previous marriage. And then he has to go to Oklahoma from urban European city to a western suburbia that's very kind of desolate, and they don't really know anyone, and it's very odd. And then her green card ends, and she has to go back to Europe with her daughter. And in that time, then Ben Affleck's character hooks up with this girl he used to go out with, played by Rachel McAdams, and then that happens. And also we meet Javier Bardem's character. He's kind of like a priest who's lost his way. And then Ben Affleck kind of breaks up with Rachel McAdams so Olga Kurylenko can come back, and they get married, and then things go on from there. I somewhat kind of think I know maybe what it's about, but I might be totally wrong. And I was never sure while I was watching that. I kind of couldn't somehow figure it out, and I wasn't sure, like, why is Javier Bardem's character even in this movie? It's really about Olga Kurylenko and Ben Affleck. It's not really about Javier Bardem. And I still don't really get exactly why Rachel McAdams is in this movie. With Terrence Malick, he's one of the few directors who really wants you to think. He wants you to come in and think during the movie. He wants you to think after the movie. In a week, I might be thinking something totally different about this movie. It's a movie that requires thought process. And I think that's not something we get from a traditional narrative. And since this film has completely given away with pretty much all narrative, or at least in a traditional sense, it's really inviting conversation about it and inviting thought and critical thought. But also it makes for a really enriching film experience. Like every time I see his films, it's an experience. I'm always like wrapped up in the film. This film might have a lot of lull parts, but there's a lot of times that I'm so enwrapped in the film, I forget about the lull parts, and I'm just kind of enwrapped in this amazingly well shot, very odd, surreal kind of movie that's both inviting and then evasive at the same time. It's like I know things about these characters, but then I feel like I don't know things about these characters. I don't think it's as much of a masterpiece as Tree of Life. He's done romance a fair number of times throughout his filmography, and this doesn't feel like anything that original, but it almost feels like he's trying to tell kind of a romance in a different sort of way. This is just centered on a romance, nothing else. There's other things about their lives, but it feels more connected as a romance. He is kind of romantic, but almost realistically romantic, because I feel like that might explain Rachel McAdams' character, that even though Ben Affleck was alone by himself, and who knows how long, it's very realistic and adult about a romance, and especially a romance where they have to move and change countries and like adapt to things just, you know, for that love, the way Marina has to. But I think this film is kind of, and in relation especially to the Javier Bardem's character of the preacher or the father, I think it's really trying to talk about, is it better to have loved and lost or never loved at all? I get that feeling about it. Yeah, they went through all these hard times. Yeah, they had a lot of hardships, but they keep cutting back to the times when Olga Kurylenko is like kind of running with the camera, and you see how beautiful she is, and you really fall in love with Marina. And Olga Kurylenko like has this kind of whimsical quality about her that I myself as an audience member really fell in love with her as a character. It's like I felt really attached to her. You know, I felt the most attached to her. That might also be because Ben Affleck's character almost felt like a conduit. It feels like the film is going from his perspective a lot. Like you're almost like from Ben Affleck's perspective watching Olga Kurylenko. But then there's definite times later in the film where it's from Olga Kurylenko's perspective, but the film is inviting you to fall in love with her the way he's falling in love with her, and why he's going through this romance and why this means so much to him. What Terrence Malick is kind of saying about romance, he's kind of showing the spirit of romance, kind of saying a lot about how, you know, I think a lot of the guise of religion is to really give you some sort of order in your life and kind of give you some control in your life. And I think a good romance can really do that for you, because oftentimes if like my wife's away for the weekend or something, it's like, or if she's away for a week and I have to go to work one of those days, it's like honestly harder for me to leave to go to work on those days. It's like kind of like I don't have as much of a reason. The feeling of loss of religion of the preacher, it kind of echoes like what's going on with their relationship, and how sometimes when that's falling apart we go to him, and it's like how losing that faith in something, this order in your life, can really be disruptive. And I think it is a lot like losing religion, you know, whether it's love of a woman or a man or of God, you know, it definitely brings some sort of meaning to your life. And without that, you're kind of on this weird existential crisis where life doesn't mean as much and isn't as passionate as it once was. And I think a lot of this film is trying to find that passion and finding ways to get it back, but then examining that passion with this amazing cinematography and the way it's told, you know, especially with Emmanuel Lubezki's camera. There's really no substitute to a Lubezki-Malick collaboration, because the framing is amazing. The way he can make even bed sheets look amazingly epic, but at the same time very personal and intimate, and how he can really follow and flow with the camera and give this film kind of like a swooping, moving quality to it with his cinematography. There are certain directors who know how to use a great cinematographer. I'm not demoting the role of the DP or anything like that, but I think a great director can really use a DP to the film's advantage and really give it kind of a whole new meaning and give it a whole new life. The shots go from like very literal to metaphorical to literal and metaphorical. I mean, there's certain shots that you're like, okay, well, that's not really like literal, but this represents this, and this is literal, but it also represents this. It's very interesting how he can balance all that as both a cinematographer, and Terrence Malick can balance that within the film. You have some really intense, great actors, but then you have these kind of real life characters, these real life people mixed in, you know, or at least they felt like real life people. They'd have someone who's just doing like one scene, they'd feel very different, they'd feel very real. I don't know exactly what he's trying to say artistically with that, but I noticed that quite a bit. Ben Affleck, it's one of those performances, I think if he wasn't there, you'd miss him. I think he's kind of a conduit, but he's doing something there. It's just he's doing something very subtle. I think it's a good performance, but you can really like kind of ignore it almost, but it is very important for the film. Olga Kurylenko, she is so good in this film. I really did fall in love with her character as Marina. She was so captivating, and she just really grabs your attention. And it's not just the cinematography of her that, I mean, she's gorgeous. She really knows how to control that. You know, it kind of reminds me of Isabella Adjani a little bit, because she's so beautiful, but she can do subtle things with her face that I think a lot of beautiful actresses can't really do, the kind of subtle facial expressions she's doing. I don't think Hollywood knows what to do with her as much as Terrence Malick certainly does. Javier Bardem, it kind of reminded me of what he did in Beautiful a little bit. There's been a lot made about this film and how he's cut a lot of people out, like Jessica Chastain, Rachel Weisz, Amanda Peet, Barry Pepper, and Michael Sheen. I don't know what they were supposed to have to do with this movie. I was watching it, I was like, does this movie suck or not? There's definitely a rewarding quality about it, and I definitely feel rewarded afterwards, and I really felt like I really watched something, and it was a very intense viewing experience. I felt like I have kind of a contact high up to The Wonder, and I almost wish I could view the world the way this film was shot. But there are some times when it lulls, I was just like, God, this is still going. Oh my God, this is... And then I'll get wrapped up in it again. And it does kind of feel like you're just seeing things that you've seen in other Terrence Malick films. But it's still a Terrence Malick film. And I think, you know, from watching Spring Breakers and watching Upstream Color, I think Terrence Malick's becoming, he already is, but he's becoming more and more of an influential filmmaker. And this still shows me why he's such an influential and great filmmaker. And I don't know if this film will really be appreciated as much, and it's kind of shocking that he comes out with another big, dense, difficult movie so quickly after Tree of Life. Part of me feels like maybe he should have spent some more time, but another part of me feels like, well, if I watch this again, how am I going to feel about it? I think I'd much rather watch this again than Tree of Life, because Tree of Life is such an intense experience and kind of brings up so many emotions, and this feels, I guess, more leisurely, at least for Terrence Malick. This is a little lighter. It's maybe sometimes too loose, or maybe I'm just too used to seeing films with a traditional narrative. And I kind of think I would like to see this film again and really examine it and just kind of maybe try to figure it out. And I feel like I'm close, but maybe I'm off. I don't know. It was a gorgeous film. Even though it's kind of somewhat of a tough watch, I found it a really rewarding experience, and I'm glad I saw To the Wonder. It's always great weeding through a Malick film and seeing what's inside, and not really maybe knowing what's inside, but trying to figure it out and experiencing it, for me, is still an interesting enough experience. So if you have seen To the Wonder and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to. This is the last film Roger Ebert reviewed, so you should check that out. It's actually pretty well written.